Happy Bloomsday, and welcome to James Joyce's native city, Dublin, where we are here in the National Library of Ireland. My name is Bob Joyce from the James Joyce Centre. I'm a grandnephew of James Joyce, and it's my pleasure to introduce our first reader, Joseph O'Connor.
Bob, can you just give them a bit of a preamble about the global gathering? Joseph's not here yet. Oh, great, there we go.
I was just passing the time of day with old Troy of the DMP at the corner of Arbour Hill there, and be damned, but a bloody sweep came along and he near drove his gear into my eye. I turned around to let him have the weight of my tongue, when who should I see dodging along Stony Batter? Only Joe Hines. "Lo, Joe," says I, "how are you blowing? Did you see that bloody chimney sweep near shove my eye out with his brush?" "Suts luck," says Joe. "Who's the old bollocks you were talking to?" "Old Troy," says I, "was in the force. I'm on two minds not to give that fellow in charge for obstructing the thoroughfare with his brooms and ladders." "What are you doing round these parts?" says Joe. "Divil a much," says I. "There is a bloody big foxy thief beyond by the garrison church at the corner of Chicken Lane. Old Troy was just giving me the wrinkle about him. Lifted any god's quantity of tea and sugar to pay 3 bob a week, said he. Had a farm in the county down off a hop of me thumb by the name of Moses Herzog, over there near Heytesbury Street." "Circumcised," says Joe. "Aye," says I, "a bit off the top. An old plumber named Geraghty. I'm hanging on to his taw now for the past fortnight and I can't get a penny out of him." "That's the lay you're on now," says Joe. "Aye," says I, "how are the mighty fallen? Collector of bad and doubtful debts. But that's the most notorious bloody robber you'd meet in a day's walk, and the face on him, all pockmarks, would hold a shower of rain. Tell him," says he, "I dare him," says he, "and I double dare him to send you round here again, or if he does," says he, "I'll have him summonsed up before the court, so I will, for trading without a licence. And he after stuffing himself till he's fit to burst." Jesus, I had to laugh at the little Jewy getting his shirt out. "He drink me my teas, he eat me my sugars, because he no pay me my monies." For non-perishable goods, bought of Moses Herzog, of 13 St. Kevin's Parade, Wood Quay Ward, merchant, herein after called the vendor, and sold and delivered to Michael E. Geraghty, Esquire, of 29 Arbour Hill in the city of Dublin, Arran Quay Ward, gentleman, herein after called the purchaser, Vida Lichet, £5 avoirdupois of first choice tea at 3 shillings per pound avoirdupois, and 3 stone avoirdupois of sugar, crushed crystal at 3 pence per pound avoirdupois, the said purchaser debtor to the said vendor of £1 5 shillings and 6 pence sterling for value received, which amount shall be paid by said purchaser to said vendor in weekly instalments every 7 calendar days of 3 shillings and no pence sterling. And the said non-perishable goods shall not be pawned, or pledged, or sold, or otherwise alienated by the said purchaser, but shall be and remain and be held to be the sole and exclusive property of the said vendor, to be disposed of at his good will and pleasure, until the said amount shall have been duly paid by the said purchaser to the said vendor, in the manner herein set forth, as this day hereby agreed, between the said vendor, his heirs, successors, trustees, and assigns of the one part, and the said purchaser, his heirs, successors, trustees, and assigns of the other part." "Are you a strict TT?" says Joe. "Not taking anything between drinks," says I. "What about paying our respects to our friend?" says Joe. "Who?" says I. "Sure, he's in John o' God's off his head, poor man." "Drinking his own stuff?" says Joe. "Aye," says I, "whiskey and water on the brain." "Come around to Barney Kiernan's," says Joe. "I want to see the citizen." "Barney Mavourneens be it," says I. "Anything strange or wonderful, Joe?" "Not a word," says Joe. "I was up at that meeting in the City Arms." "What was that, Joe?" says I. Cattle traders, says Joe, about the foot and mouth disease. I want to give the citizen the hard word about it. So we went around by the Linen Hall barracks and the back of the courthouse, talking of one thing or another. Decent fellow, Joe, when he has it, but sure, like that, he never has it. Jesus, I couldn't get over that bloody foxy Geraghty, the daylight robber, for trading without a licence, says he. In Inishvale the fair, there lies a land, the land of holy Michan. There rises a watchtower beheld of men afar. There sleep the mighty dead as in life they slept, warriors and princes of high renown. A pleasant land it is, in sooth, of murmuring waters, fishful streams where sport the gunnard, the plaice, the roach, the halibut, the jibbed haddock, the grilse, the dab, the brill, the flounder, the mixed coarse fish generally, and other denizens of the aqueous kingdom too numerous to be enumerated. In the mild breezes of the west and of the east, the lofty trees wave in different directions their first-class foliage, the wafty sycamore, the Lebanonian cedar, the exalted plane tree, the eugenic eucalyptus, and other ornaments of the arboreal world with which that region is thoroughly well supplied. Lovely maidens sit in close proximity to the roots of the lovely trees, singing the most lovely songs, while they play with all kinds of lovely objects, as for example, golden ingots, silvery fishes, crans of herrings, draughts of eels, codlings, creels of fingerlings, purple sea gems, and playful insects. And heroes voyage from afar to woo them, from Ablana to Slieve Margie, the peerless princes of unfettered Munster, and of Connacht the Just, and of smooth, sleek Leinster, and of Cruachan's land, and of Armagh the Splendid, and of the noble district of Boyle, princes, the sons of kings. And there rises a shining palace, whose crystal glittering roof is seen by mariners who traverse the extensive sea in barks built expressly for that purpose. And thither come all herds and fatlings and first fruits of that land, for O'Connell Fitzsimon takes toll of them, a chieftain descended from chieftains. Thither the extremely large wains bring foison of the fields, flaskets of cauliflowers, floats of spinach, pineapple chunks, Rangoon beans, strikes of tomatoes, drums of figs, drills of swedes, spherical potatoes, and tallies of iridescent kale, York and Savoy, and trays of onions, pearls of the earth, and punnets of mushrooms, and custard marrows, and fat vetches, and beer and rape, and red, green, yellow, brown, russet, sweet, big, bitter, ripe, pomellated apples, and chips of strawberries, and sieves of gooseberries, pulpy and pelurious, and strawberries fit for princes, and raspberries from their canes. I dare 'em, says he, and I double dare 'em. Come out here, Geraghty, you notorious bloody hill and dale robber. And by that way wend the herds innumerable of bellwethers and flushed ewes, and shearling rams and lambs, and stubble geese, and medium steers, and roaring mares, and polled calves, and long wools, and store sheep, and cuffs prime springers, and culls and sow pigs, and bacon hogs, and the various different varieties of highly distinguished swine, and Angus heifers, and polly bullocks of immaculate pedigree, together with prime premiated milch cows and beeves, and there is ever heard a trampling, cackling, roaring, lowing, bleating, bellowing, rumbling, grunting, champing, chewing of sheep and pigs, and heavy-hooved kine from pasture lands of Lush and Rush and Carrickmines, and from the streamy vales of Thomond, from McGillicuddy's reeks the inaccessible, and lordly Shannon the unfathomable, and from the gentle declivities of the place of the race of Keir, their udders distended with superabundance of milk, and butts of butter, and rennets of cheese, and farmers' firkins, and targets of lamb, and crannocks of corn, and oblong eggs, in great hundreds, various in size, the agate with the dun. So we turned into Barney Kiernan's, and there sure
having a great confab with himself and that bloody mangy mongrel Gary Owen, and he waiting for what the sky would drop in the way of drink. There he is, says I, in a glory hole, with Krushkin Lawn on his load of papers, working for the cause. The bloody mongrel, let a grouse out of him would give you the creeps. Be a corporal work of mercy if someone would take the life of that bloody dog. I'm told for a fact he ate a good part of the breeches off a constabulary man in Santry that came round one time with a blue paper about a licence. Stand and deliver, says he. That's all right, citizen, says Joe. Friends here. Pass, friends, says he. And he rubs his hand in his eye and says he, what's your opinion of the times? Doing the rappery and rory of the hill. But begob, Joe was equal to the occasion. I think the markets are on a rise, says he, sliding his hand down his fork. So begob, the citizen claps his paw on his knee and he says, Foreign wars is the cause of it. And says Joe, sticking his thumb in his pocket, it's the Russians wish to tyrannize. Give over your bloody cotton, Joe, says I. I've a thirst on me I wouldn't sell for half a crown. Give it a name, citizen, says Joe. Wine of the country, says he. What's yours, says Joe. Ditto Macanaspy, says I. 3 pints Terry, says Joe. And how's the old Harte, citizen, says he. Never better Cora, says he. What, Gary, are you going to win, eh? And with that, he took the bloody old trouser by the scruff of the neck, and by Jesus, he near throttled him. The figure, seated on a large boulder at the foot of a round tower, was that of a broad-shouldered, deep-chested, strong-limbed, frank-eyed, red-haired, freely freckled, shaggy-bearded, wide-mouthed, large-nosed, long-headed, deep-voiced, bare-kneed, brawny-handed, hairy-legged, ruddy-faced, sinew-armed hero. From shoulder to shoulder he measured several ells, and his rock-like mountainous knees were covered, as was likewise the rest of his body, wherever visible, with a strong growth of tawny, prickly hair, in hue and buffness similar to the mountain gorse, Ulex europaeus. The wide-winged nostrils, from which bristles of the same tawny hue projected, were of such capaciousness that within their cavernous obscurity the field lark might easily have lodged her nest. The eyes, in which a tear and a smile strove ever for the mastery, were of the dimensions of a good-sized cauliflower. A powerful current of warm breath issued at regular intervals from the profound cavity of his mouth, while in rhythmic resonance the loud, strong, hail reverberations of his formidable heart thundered rumblingly, causing the ground, the summit of the lofty tower, and the still loftier walls of the cave to vibrate and tremble. He wore a long, unsleeved garment of recently flayed oxhide, reaching to the knees in a loose kilt, and this was bound about his middle by a girdle of plaited straw and rushes. Beneath this he wore trews of deerskin, roughly stitched with gut. His nether extremities were encased in high balbriggan buskins dyed in lichen purple, the feet being shod with brogues of salted cowhide, laced with the windpipe of the same beast. From his girdle hung a row of sea stones, which dangled at every movement of his portentous frame, and on these were graven with rude yet striking art the tribal images of many Irish heroes and heroines of antiquity. Cuchulainn, Conn of 100 battles, Niall of 9 hostages, Brian of Kincora, the Ardree Malachy, Art MacMurrough, Shane O'Neill, Father John Murphy, Owen Rowe, Patrick Sarsfield, Red Hugh O'Donnell, Red Jim McDermott, Soggarth Owen O'Growney, Michael Dwyer, Francie Higgins, Henry Joy McCracken, Goliath, Horace Wheatley, Thomas Conneff, Peg Woffington, the village blacksmith, Captain Moonlight, Captain Boycott, Dante Alighieri, Christopher Columbus, St. Fursa, St. Brendan, Marshall McMahon, Charlemagne, Theobald Wolfe Tone, the mother of the Maccabees, the last of the Mohicans, the Rose of Castile, the man for Galway, the man that broke the bank at Monte Carlo, the man in the Gap, the woman who didn't, Benjamin Franklin, Napoleon Bonaparte, John L. O'Sullivan, Cleopatra, Savornine Deelish, Julius Caesar, Paracelsus, Sir Thomas Lipton, William Tell, Michelangelo, Hayes, Mahomet, the Bride of Lammermoor, Peter the Hermit, Peter the Packer, Dark Rosaline, Patrick W. Shakespeare, Brian Confucius, Myrta Gutenberg, Patricio Velasquez, Captain Nemo, Tristan and Isolde, the first Prince of Wales, Thomas Cook and Son, the Bold Soldier Boy, Aaron Pogue, Dick Turpin, Ludwig Beethoven, the Colleen Bawn, Wadler Healy, Angus the Culdee, Dolly Mount, Sidney Parade, Ben Hoth, Valentine Great Rakes, Adam and Eve, Arthur Wellesley, Boss Croker, Herodotus, Jack the Giant Killer, Gautama Buddha, Lady Godiva, the Lily Killarney, Baylor of the Evil Eye, the Queen of Sheba, Aki Nagel, Joe Nagel, Alessandro Volta, Jeremiah O'Donovan Rossa, Don Philip O'Sullivan Bear, a couched spear of acuminated grant, rested by him, while at his feet reposed a savage animal of the canine tribe, whose stertorous gasps announced that he was sunk in uneasy slumber, a supposition confirmed by hoarse growls and spasmodic movements, which his master repressed from time to time by tranquilizing blows of a mighty cudgel rudely fashioned out of Paleolithic stone. So anyhow, Terry brought the 3 pints Joe was standing, and begob, sight nearly left my eyes when I saw him hand out a quid. Oh, as I'm true as I'm telling you, a good-looking sovereign. And there's more where that came from, says he. Are you robbing the poor bok, Joe? Says I. Sweated me brow, says Joe. 'Twas the prudent member gave me the wheeze. I saw him before I met you, says I, sloping around by Pill Lane and Greek Street with his cod's eye counting up all the guts of the fish. Who comes through Mycon's land, bedight in sable armour. O Bloom, the son of Rory, it is he. Impervious to fear is Rory's son, he of the prudent soul. For the old woman in Princess Street, says the citizen, the subsidised organ, the pledge-bound party on the floor of the house. And look at this blasted rag, said he. Look at this, said he. The Irish Independent, if you please, founded by Parnell to be the working man's friend. Listen to the births and deaths in the Irish All for Ireland Independent, and I'll thank you, and the marriages. And he starts reading them out. Gordon, Barnfield Crescent, Exeter. Redmayne of Iffley, St. Anne's-on-Sea, the wife of William T. Redmayne, of a son. How's that, eh? Wright and Flint. Vincent and Gillett to the Marion, daughter of Rosa, and late George Alfred Gillett, 179 Clapham Road, Stockwell, Playwood and Risdale at St. Jude's, Kensington, the very Reverend Dr. Forrest, Dean of Worcester, eh? Deaths, Bristow at Whitehall Lane, London, Carr, Stoke Newington, of gastritis and heart disease, Cockburn at the Moat House, Chepstow. I know that fella, says Joe, from bitter experience. Cockburn, Dimsey, wife of David Dimsey, late of the Admiralty. Miller, Tottenham, aged 85. Welsh, June 12th at 35 Canning Street, Liverpool. Isabel Helen. How's that for a national press? Amy Brown's son. How's that for Martin Murphy, the Bantry jobber? Ah, well, says Joe, handing round the booze. Thanks be to God they had the start of us. Drink that, citizen. I will, says he, honourable person. Health, Joe, says I, and all down the form. Ah, ow, don't be talking. I was blue mouldy for the want of that point. Declare to God, I could hear it hit the pit of me stomach with a click. And lo, as they quaffed their cup of joy, a godlike messenger came swiftly in, radiant as the eye of heaven, a homely youth, and behind him there passed an elder of noble gait and countenance, bearing the sacred scrolls of law, and with them his lady wife, a dame of peerless lineage, fairest of her race.
And now our next reader is one of Ireland's most famous actors, Frank Kelly.
Little Alf Bergen popped in around the door and hid behind Barney's snug, squeezed up with laughing. And who was sitting there in the corner that I hadn't seen? snoring drunk, blind to the world, only Bob Doran. I didn't know what was up, and Alf kept making signs out of the door. And begod, what was it? Only bloody owl pantaloon Dennis Breen in his bath slippers with 2 bloody big books tucked under his oxter, and the wife hot-foot after him. Unfortunate, wretched woman trotting like a poodle. I thought Alf would split. Look at us, says he. Breen. He's traipsing all round Dublin with a postcard some sent him with a UP up on it to take a lie, and he dubbed up. Take a what, says I? Libel action, says he, for £10,000. Oh, hell, says I. The bloody mongrel began to growl that had put the fear of God in you, seeing something was up. But the citizen gave him a kick in the ribs. Be it hushed, said he. Who, says Joe? Breen, says Alf. He was in John Henry Menton's, and then he went round to Collison Ward's. Then Tom Rochford met him and sent him round to the sub-sheriffs for a lark. Oh, God! I've a pain laughing. U.P. up. The law fella gave him an eye as good as Process. Another bloody old lunatic has gone round to Green Street to look for a G-man. When is Long John going to hang that fellow in Mountjoy, says Joe. Bergen, says Bob Doran, waking up. Is that Alf Bergen? Yes, says Alf. Hanging? Wait till I show you. Here, Harry, there's a pony. That bloody old fool. £10,000. You should have seen Long John's eye. U.P. And he started laughing. What are you laughing at, says Bob Doran. Is that Bergen? Hurry up, Terry boy, Alf. Terence O'Ryan heard him, and straight away bought him a crystal cup full of the foaming Ebon ale, which the noble twin brothers Bungvay and Bungardalone brew ever in their divine alivats, cunning as the sons of deathless Leda. For they garner the succulent berries of hop, and mass and sift and bruise and brew them, and they mix therewith sour juices, and bring the must to the sacred fire, and cease not night or day from their toil, those cunning brothers, lord of the vat. Then did you, chivalrous Terence, hand forth as to the manner born, that nectarous beverage, and you offered crystal up to him, thirsted, the soul of chivalry, in beauty akin to the immortals. But he, the young chief of the O'Bergens, could ill brook to be outdone in generous deeds, but gave therefore with gracious gesture a tessoon of costliest bronze. Thereon embossed in excellent smithwork was seen the image of a queen of regal port, scion of the house of Brunswick, Victoria her name, her most excellent majesty by grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and of the British dominions beyond the sea, Queen, defender of the faith, Empress of India, even she who bore rule a victress over many peoples, the well-beloved, for they knew and loved her, from the rising of the sun to the going down thereof, the pale, the dark, the ruddy, and the Ethiop. What's that bloody Freemason doing, says the citizen, prowling up and down outside. What's that, Joe? Here you are, says Alf, chuckling out the rhino. Talking about hanging, I'll show you something you never saw. Hangman's letters. Look at here. So he took a bundle of wisps of letters and envelopes out of his pocket. Are you codding, says I? Honest Injuns, Alf. Read them. So Joe took up the letters. Who are you laughing at, says Bob Doran. So I saw there was going to be a bit of a dust. Bob's a queer chap when the porter's up on him, so, says I, just make talk. How's Willie Murray these times, Alf? I don't know, says Alf. I saw him just now in Capel Street with Paddy Dignam. Only I was running after that. You what? Says Joe, throwing down the letters. With who? With Dignam, says Alf. Is it Paddy, says Joe. Yes, says Alf. Why? Don't you know he's dead, says Joe. Paddy Dignam dead, says Alf. Aye, Joe. Sure, after seeing him not 5 minutes ago, says Alf. As plain as pikestaff. Who's dead, says Bob Doran. You saw his ghost then, says Joe. God between us and all harm. What, says Alf? Good Christ, only 5, what? And William were with them. 2 of them there, near, what do you call them? What? Dignam, dead? What about Dignam, says Bob Doran. Who's talking about dead, says Alf. He's more dead than you are. Maybe so, says Joe. They took the liberty of burying him this morning anyhow. Paddy, says Alf. Aye, says Joe. He's paid the debt of nature. God be merciful to him. Good Christ, says Alf. Begob, he was what you might call flabbergasted. In the darkness, spirit hands were felt to flutter. When prayer by tantras had been directed to the proper quarter, a faint but increasing luminosity of ruby light became gradually visible. The apparition of the etheric double being particularly lifelike owing to the discharge of jivic rays from the crown of the head and face. Communication was effected through the pituitary body and also by means of the orange fiery and scarlet rays emanating from the sacral region and solar plexus. Questioned by his earth name as to his whereabouts in the heaven world, he stated that he was now on the path of pralaya, or return, but was still submitted to trial at the hands of certain bloodthirsty entities on the lower astral levels. In reply to a question as to his first sensation in the great divide beyond, he stated that previously he had seen as in a glass darkly, but that those who had passed over had summit possibilities of atmic development opened up to them. Interrogated as to whether life there resembled our experience in the flesh, he stated that he had heard from more favoured beings, now in the spirit, that their bodies were equipped with every modern home comfort, such as talafana, elevator, hatakalda, water closet, and that the highest adepts were steeped in waves of volupty of the very purest nature. Having requested a quart of buttermilk, this was brought and evidently afforded relief. Asked if he had any message for the living, he exhorted all who were still on the wrong side of Maya to acknowledge the true path. For it was reported in Dranic circles that Mars and Jupiter were out for mischief on the eastern angle where the ram has power. It was then queried whether there were any special desires on the part of the defunct. And the reply was, "We greet you, friends of Earth, who are still in the body. Mind CK doesn't pile it on." It was ascertained that the reference was to Mr. Cornelius Kelleher, manager of Messrs. H.J. O'Neill's popular funeral establishment, a personal friend of the defunct, who had been responsible for the carrying out of the interment arrangements. Before parting, he requested that it should be told to his dear son Patsy that the other boot, which he had been looking for, was at present under the commode in the return room, and that the pair should be sent to Collins to be sold only, as the heels were still good. He stated that this greatly perturbed his peace of mind in the other region, and earnestly requested that his desire should be made known. Assurances were given that the matter would be attended to, and it was intimated that this had given satisfaction. He is gone from mortal haunts, O Dignam, son of the morning. Feet was his foot on the bracken, Patrick of beamy brow. Wail, Bamba, with your wind, and wail, O ocean, with your whirlwind. There it is again, says the citizen, staring out. Who, says I? Bloom, says he. He's on point duty up and down there for the last 10 minutes, and begob I saw his fizzog do a peep in and then slither out again. Little Alf was not Borways, faith he was. Good Christ, says he, I could have sworn it was him. Answers Bob Doran with the hat on the back of his pole, lowest blackguard in Dublin when he's under the influence. Who said Christ is good? I beg your parsnip, says Alf. Is that a good Christ, says Bob Doran, to take away poor little Willie Dignam? Ah, well, says Alf, try to pass it off. He's over all his troubles. But Bob Doran shouts out of him, he's a bloody ruffian, I say, to take away poor little Willie Dignam. Terry came down and tipped them to keep quiet, that they didn't want that kind of talk in a respectable licensed premises. And Bob Doran starts doing the weeps about Paddy Dignam. You're there. The finest man, says he, snivelling. The finest, purest character. The tears bloody near your eye, talking through his bloody hat. Fit for him to go home to that little sleepwalking bitch married. Mooney, the bum bailiff's daughter. Mother kept a kip, Bantam Lyons told me, that was stepping out at 2 a.m. without a stitch on her, exposing her person, open to all customers, fair field and no favour. The noblest, the truest, says he, and he's gone. Poor little Willie, poor little Paddy Dignam. And mournful and with a heavy heart, he wept the extinction of that beam of heaven. Old Gary Owen started growling again at Bloom that was skeezing around the door. Come on in! Come on! He won't eat you, said the citizen. So Bloom slopes in with his cod's eye on the dog, and he asked Terry, was Martin Cunningham there? Oh, Christ, McKeown, says Joe, reading out with the letter. Listen to this, will you? He starts reading out one. 7 Hunter Street, Liverpool, to the High Sheriff of Dublin. Honoured Sir, I beg to offer my services in the above-mentioned painful case. I hanged Joe Gann in Bootle Jail on the 12th of February 1900. And I hanged Joe, says I, Private Arthur Chase, for foul murder of Jesse Tilsit in Pentonville Prison. And I was assistant by Jesus, says I, Billington executed the awful murderer Toad Smith. The citizen made a grab at the letter. Hold hard, says Joe. I have a special knack of putting the noose. Once in, he can't get out. Hoping to be favoured, I remain honoured, sir. My terms is 5 guineas. H. Rumbold, Master Barber.
Our next reader is Rob Berry, who is a cartoonist from the United States of America.
And a barbarous, bloody barbarian he is, too, says the citizen. With a dirty scrawl the rest, says Joe. Here, says he, take the hell out of my sight, elf. Hello, Bloom, says he. What will you have? So they started arguing about the point, Bloom saying he wouldn't and couldn't, and excuse him, no offense, and all to that. And then he said, well, he'd just take a cigar. God, he's a prudent member and mistake. It was one of your prime stickers, Terry, says Joe. And Alpha telling us. There was one chap sent in a mourning card with a black border around it. They're all barbers, says he, from a black country that would hang their own fathers for £5 down in traveling expenses. And he was telling us there's 2 fellows waiting low to pull his heels down when he gets the drop and choke him properly, and then they chop up the rope after and sell bits for a few bob's gall. In the dark land they bide, the vengeful knights of razor. The deadly coil they grasp, yea, and therein they lead to Erebus whatsoever hath done a deed of blood, for I will on no wise suffer it, even so saith the Lord. Well, they started talking about capital punishment, and of course Bloom comes out with the why and the wherefore, and all the codality of the business, and the old dog smelling them all the time. I'm told these Jewies do have a sort of queer odor coming off them for dogs, about I don't know what, all deterrent effects, and so forth, and so on. There's one thing it has a deterrent effect on, says Elf. What's that, says Joe. The poor bugger's tool that's being hanged, says Elf. That's so, says Joe. God's truth, says Elf. I heard that from the head warder down at Kilmainham when they hanged Joe Brady, the Invincible. He told me they cut him down after the drop and it was standing up in their faces like a poker. Ruling passion, song and death, says Joe, as someone said. That can be explained by science, says Bloom. It's only natural phenomenon, don't you see, because on account of And then he starts with his jawbreakers about phenomenon and science and this phenomenon and the other phenomenon. The distinguished scientist, her Professor Luitpold Blumenduft, tendered medical evidence to the effect that the instantaneous fracture of the cervical vertebrae and consequent incision of the spinal cord would, according to the best approved traditions of medical science, be calculated to inevitably produce in the human subject a violent ganglionic stimulus of the nerve centers, causing the pores of the corpora cavernosa to rapidly dilate in such a way as to instantaneously facilitate the flow of blood to that part of human anatomy known as the penis, or male organ, resulting in the phenomenon which has been denominated by the faculty of morbid upwards and outwards phylogenitive erection in articulo mortis or diminutum capitis. So, of course, the citizen was only waiting for the link of the word, and he starts asking out him about the Invincibles, and the Old Guard, and the men of the 67, and who fear to speak of the 98, and Joe with him, all about the fellows that were hanged, drawn, and transported from the cause by Drumhead Court-Martial, and New Ireland, and New this, that, and the other. Talking about New Ireland, he ought to go and get a new dog, so he thought. Mangy, ravenous brute, sniffling and sneezing all around the place and scratching his scabs. And Rundy goes to Bob Doran, that standing alpha, half of one sucking up for what he could get. So, of course, Bob Doran starts doing the bloody fool with him. Give us a paw. Give us a paw, doggy. Good old doggy. Give us the paw here. Give us the paw. Bloody end of the paw. He paw his elf trying to keep from tumbling off the bloody stool atop the bloody old dog, and he'd taken all kinds of drivel about training by kindness and thoroughbred dog and intelligent dog. Give you the bloody hip. And he starts scraping a few bits of old biscuit out of the bottom of the Jacob's tin he told Terry to bring. God, he gobbled it down like old boots, and his tongue hanging out of him a yard long for more. Near ate the tin and all, hungry bloody mongrel. And the citizen and Bloom having an argument about the point. The brother Cheers, Wolf Tone, Beyond an Arbor, Hill and Robert Hammond, Die for Your Country, and Tommy Moore touch about Sarah Curran and She Far from the Land, and Bloom, of course, with knock-me-down cigar, putting on swank with his lard face. Phenomenon. That fat heap of them he married is a nice phenomenon with their back on it like a ball alley. Time they were stopped up in City Arms, Pisterberg told me there was an old one there with a cracked Lermont of a nephew, and Bloom trying to get on the soft side of her, doing the mollycoddle, playing Bezique to come in for a bit of wampum in her will, and not eating meat on Friday because the old one was always stumping her caw and making the low talk for a walk. And one time, he led him the rounds of Dublin, and by the Holy Father, he never cried crack till he brought him home as drunk as a boiled owl, and he said he did it to teach him the evils of alcohol. Buy herrings if the three women didn't near roast him. It's a queer story, the old one, Bloom's wife, Mrs. O'Dowd, that kept the hotel. Jesus, I had a laugh as Pisterberg taking them out, chewing the fat, and Bloom with his, but don't you see, and but on the other hand, sure more betokens the lout untold in Powers after the blenders, round in Hope Street, going home footless in a cab 5 times a week after drinking his way through all the samples in the bloody establishment. Phenomenon. The memory of the dead, says the citizen, taking up his pint glass and glaring at Bloom. Aye, says Joe. Well, you don't grasp my point, says Bloom. What I mean is, Sinn Fein, says the citizen. Sinn Fein, oh on! The friends we love are by our sides and the foes we hate before us. The last farewell was affecting in the the funereal death bell tolled unceasingly, while all around the gloomy precincts rolled the ominous warning 100 muffled drums punctuated by the hollow booming of pieces of ordnance, the deafening clasp of thunder and the dazzling flashes of lightning which lit up the ghastly scene testified that the artillery of heaven had lent its supernatural pomp to the already gruesome spectacle. A torrential rain poured down from the floodgates of the angry heavens upon the bared heads of the assembled multitude, which numbered the lowest computation at 500,000 persons. A posse of Dublin Metropolitan Police, superintended by the Chief Commissioner in person, maintained order in the vast throng for whom the York Street Brass and Reed Band while away the intervening time by admirably rendering on their black-tripped instruments matchless melody endeared to us from the cradle by Speranza's plaintive muse. Special quick excursion trains and upholstered charbox had been provided from the comfort of our country cousins, of whom there were large contingents. Considerable amusement was caused by the favorite Dublin street singers Lennon and Mulligan, who sang the night before Larry was stretched in their usual mirth-provoking fashion. Our two inimitable drolls did a roaring trade with their broadsheets among lovers of comedy element, and nobody who has a corner in his heart for real Irish fun without vulgarity will grudge them their hard-earned pennies. The children of the male and female foundling hospital, who thronged the windows overlooking scene, were delighted with this unexpected addition to the day's entertainment, and a word of praise is due to the Little Sisters of the Poor for their excellent idea of affording the poor fatherless and motherless children a genuinely instructive treat. The vice-regal house party, which included many well-known ladies, was chaperoned by their excellencies to the most favorable positions on the grandstand, while the picturesque foreign delegation, known as the Friend of the Emerald Isle, was accommodated on a tribune directly opposite. The delegation, present in full force, consisted of Commendatore Baci Baci Bini Benoni, the semi-paralyzed doyen of the party who had to be assisted to the seat by the aid of a powerful steam crane, Monsieur Paul Petitpont, the Grand Joker Vladimir Pocket Handkerchief, the Arch-Joker Leopold Rudolf von Schwarzenbaden-Hohenthal, Countess Marha Varaga Kitzitzoni Prutashi, Hiram Y. Bomboost, Count Anthenotus Caramelopoulos, Ali Baba Bakshish Rahat Rokum Effendi, Signor Hidalgo Fiero Don Piccadilly Pipelabras y Paternosta della Maloria della Malaria, Hoko Hara Kitty, Hai Hong Chang, Olaf Kober Kettleson, Mynheer Trick van Bromps, Pan Polax Patty Rieski, Goosepond Prittle, Karabrachi Nistich, Herr Horhausdirektor President Hans Struley, National Gymnasium Museum Sanatorium and Sensorium Ordinary Private Docent General History Special Professor Dr. Krigfried Uber Allgemein. All the delegates, without exception, expressed themselves in the strongest possible heterogeneous terms concerning the nameless barbarity they had been called upon to witness. An animated altercation, in which all took part, ensued among the FOTEI as to whether the 8th or 9th of March was the correct date of the birth of Ireland's patron saint. In the course of the argument, cannonballs, sitars, boomerangs, blunderbusses, stink pots, meat choppers, umbrellas, catapults, knuckle dusters, sandbags, lumps of iron were resorted to, and blows were freely exchanged. The baby policeman, Constable MacFadden, summoned by special courier from Booterstown, quickly restored order with lightning promptitude, proposed 17th of the month as a solution equally honorable for both contending parties. The ready-witted nine-footer's suggestion at once appealed to all and was unanimously accepted. Constable MacFadden was heartily congratulated by all the FOTEI, several of whom were bleeding profusely. Commendatore Benigno Benanone, having been extricated from underneath the presidential armchair, it was explained by his legal advisor, Avvocato Pamimi, that the various articles secreted in his 32 pockets had been abstracted by him during the affray from the pockets of his junior colleagues in hope of bringing them to their senses. The objects, which included several hundred ladies and gentlemen's gold and silver watches, were promptly restored to their rightful owners, and general harmony reigned supreme.
And now, from that aptly named band Dubliners, from Dublin, John Sheahan.
Thank you, Bob. Quietly, unassumingly, Rumbold stepped onto scaffold in faultless morning dress, and wearing his favourite flower, the Gladiolus cruentus.
He announced his presence by that gentle Rumboian cough, which so many have tried unsuccessfully to imitate. Short, painstaking, yet but also characteristic of the man. The arrival of the world-renowned headsman was greeted by a roar of acclamation from the huge concourse, the vice-regal ladies waving their handkerchiefs in their excitement, while the even more excitable foreign delegates cheered vociferously a medley of cries: Hogue, Banzai, Elgin, Zivio, Chin Chin, Polocronia, Hip Hip, Viva, Allah, amid which the ringing and viva of the delegate of the land of song, a double F recalling those piercingly lovely notes with which eunuch Catalini beglamoured our great-great-grandmothers, was easily distinguishable. It was exactly 17 o'clock. The signal for prayer was then promptly given by megaphone, and in an instant all heads were bared. The Commendatore's patriarchal sombrero, which had been in the possession of the family since the revolution of Rienzi, being removed by his medical advisor in attendance, Dr. Pippi. The learned prelate who administered the last comforts of holy religion to the hero martyr when about to pay the death penalty, knelt in a most Christian spirit in a pool of rainwater, his cassock above the hoary head, and offered up at the throne of grace fervent prayers of supplication. Hard by the lock stood the grim figure of the executioner, his visage being concealed in a 10-gallon pot with two circular perforated apertures through which his eyes scoured furiously. As he awaited the fatal signal, he tested the edge of his horrible weapon by honing it upon his brawny forearm, or decapitated in rapid succession a flock of sheep which had been provided by the admirers of his fell but necessary office. On a handsome mahogany table near him were neatly arranged the quartering knife, the various finely tempered disaboweling appliances, specially supplied by the world-famous firm of cutlers, Messrs. John Round and Sons, Sheffield. A terracotta saucepan for the reception of the Dignam, colon, blind intestine, and appendix, etc., were successfully extracted, and two commodious milk jugs destined to receive the most precious blood of the most precious victim. The house steward of the amalgamated cats and dogs home was in attendance to convey these vessels when replenished to that beneficent institution. Quite an excellent repast consisting of rashers and eggs, fried steak and onions done to a nicety, delicious hot breakfast rolls, and invigorating tea had been considerately provided by the authorities for consumption of the central figure of the tragedy, who in capital spirits when prepared for death and evinced the keenest interest in the proceedings from beginning to end. But he, to an abnegation rare in these our times, rose nobly to the occasion and expressed the dying wish, immediately acceded to, that the meal should be divided in aliquot parts among the members of the Sick and Indigent Bloomkeepers Association as a token of his regard and esteem. The neck and non plus ultra of emotion were reached when blushing bride-elect burst her way through the serried ranks of the bystanders and flung herself upon the muscular bosom of him who was about to be launched into eternity for her sake. The hero folded her willowy form in a loving embrace, murmuring fondly, "Sheila, my own." Encouraged by this use of her Christian name, she kissed passionately all the various suitable areas of his person which the decencies of prison garb permitted her ardour to reach. She swore to him as mingled the salt dreams of their tears, that she would cherish his memory, that she would never forget her hero boy, who went to his death, the song on his lips, as if he were but going to a hurling match in Clontarf Park. She brought back to his recollection the happy days of blissful childhood together on the banks of Analifi, when they had indulged in the innocent pastimes of the young, and oblivious of the dreadful present, they both laughed heartily. All the spectators, including the venerable pastor, joined in the general merriment.
That monster audience simply rocked with delight. And on they were overcome with grief and clasped their hands for the last time. A fresh torrent of tears burst from their lacrimal ducts, and the vast concourse of people, touched to the inmost core, broke in heart-rending sobs, not the least affected being the aged prebendary himself. Big strong men, officers of the peace, and genial giants of the Royal Irish Constabulary were making frank use of their handkerchiefs, and it is safe to say that there was not a dry eye in that record assemblage. A most romantic incident occurred when a handsome young Oxford graduate, noted for his chivalry towards the fair sex, stepped forward and, presenting his visiting card, bank book and genealogical tree, solicited the hand of the hapless young lady, requesting her to name the day, and was accepted on the spot. Every lady in the audience was presented with a tasteful souvenir of the occasion in the shape of skull and crossbones brooch, a timely and generous act which evoked a fresh outburst of emotion. And when the gallant young Oxonian, bearer, by the way, of one of the most time-honoured names in Albion's history, placed on the finger of his blushing fiancée an expensive engagement ring, emeralds set in the form of a four-leaf shamrock, excitement knew no bounds. Nay, even the stern Provost Marshal, Lieutenant Colonel Tompkin Maxwell, French Mullen Tomlinson, who provided on a sad occasion, he who had blown a considerable number of sepoys from the cannon mouth without flinching, could not now restrain his natural emotion. With his mail gauntlet, he brushed away a furtive tear and was overheard by those privileged boors who happened to be in his immediate entourage to murmur to himself in a faltering undertone, "God blimey, if she ain't a clinker, that there bleed heart. Blimey, it makes me kind of bleeding cross-straight, it does, when I sees her, because I thinks of my old mash tubs waiting for me down Limehouse Way." So then the citizen begins talking about the Irish language and the corporation meeting and all to that, and the Shawnees that can't speak their own language. Joe chipping in because he stuck someone for a quid, and Bloom putting his old goo at his tuppy stump that he cashed off of Joe, and talking about the Gaelic League and the Anti-Treating League and drink, the Court of Ireland. Anti-treating is about the size of it. God, he'd let you pour all manner of drink down his throat till the Lord call him before you ever see the fraud his point. And one night I went in with a fellow into one of their musical evenings, sung and danced about she could get up in the truss of hay she could, my Maureen lay, and there was a fellow with a ballyhooly blue ribbon badge sniffing out of in Irish, and a lot of Colleen Bonds going on with their temperance beverages and selling medals and oranges and lemonade and a few old dry buns. God, flahoolic entertainment, don't be talking. Ireland sober is Ireland free. And then an old fella starts blowing into his bagpipes, and all the guests are shuffling their feet to the tune the old cow died of. And one by one, Sky pilots and one or two Sky pilots having an eye round that there was no goings on with the females, hidden below belt. So, however, as I was saying, the old dog seen the tin was empty. Excuse me. Not in the script. So, however, as I was saying, the old dog seen the tin was empty, starts mousing around by Joe and me. I'd train him with kindness so he would if he was my dog, give him a rousing fine kick now and again where it wouldn't blind him. "Afraid he'll bite you," said the citizen, sneering. "No," says I, "but he might take my leg for the lamppost." So he calls the old dog over. "What's on you, Gary?" says he. Then he starts hauling and mauling and talking to him in Irish, and the old cows are growling and let on to answer, like duet in the opera. Such growling you never heard as they let off between them. Someone that has nothing better to do ought to write a letter pro bono publico to papers about the muzzling order for the dog to like it. Growling and grousing and his eye all bloodshot from the drought is in it, and the hydrophobia dropping out of his jaws. All those who were interested in the spread of human culture among the lower animals, and their name is Legion, should make a point of not missing the really marvellous exhibition of Santhropy given by the famous old Irish red wolfhound setter, formerly known by the sobriquet of Garryowen. and recently rechristened by his large circle of friends and acquaintances, Owen Gary. The exhibition, which is the result of years of training by kindness and a carefully thought out dietary system, comprises, among other achievements, the recitation of verse. Our greatest living phonetic expert, wild horses shall not drag it from us, has left no stone unturned in his efforts to elucidate and compare the verse cited, and has found it bears a striking resemblance, the italics are ours, to the ranns of ancient Celtic bards. We are not speaking so much of those delightful love songs with which the writer conceals his identity under the graceful pseudonym of the Little Sweet Branch has familiarised the book-loving world, but rather as a contributor, DOC points out in an interesting communication published by an evening contemporary, the harsher and more personal note which is found in the satirical effusions of the famous Raftery and of Donald McConsidine, saying nothing of the modern lyricist at present very much in the public eye. We subjoin a specimen which has been rendered into English by an eminent scholar whose name for the moment we are not at liberty to disclose, though we believe that our readers will find the topical allusion rather more than an indication. The metrical system of the canine original, which recalls the intricate alliterative and isosyllabic rules of the Welsh England, is infinitely more complicated, but we believe our readers would agree that spirit has been well cut. Perhaps it should be added that the effect is greatly increased if Owen's verse spoken somewhat slowly and indistinctly, in a tone suggestive of suppressed rancour. The course of my course is 7 days every day, and 7 dry Thursdays on you, Barney, Kieran, has no sup of water to cool my courage, and my guts roaring after Lowry's luts. So I told Terry to bring in some water for the dog, and gob, you could hear him lapping it up a mile off. And Joe asked him, would he have another? I will, says he, a Cara, to show there's no ill feeling. Gob, he's not as green as his cabbage looking, arsing around from one pub to another, leaving it to your own honour with old Giltrap's dog and getting fed up by ratepayers and corporators. Entertainment for man and beast. And says Joe, could you make a hole in another pint? Could a swim, Duck, says I. Say again, Terry, says Joe. Are you sure you won't have anything in the way of liquid refreshment, says he. Thank you, no, says Bloom. As a matter of fact, I just wanted to meet Martin Cunningham, don't you see, about this insurance of poor Dignam's. Martin asked me to go to the house. See, he, Dignam, didn't serve any notice of the assignment on the company at the time, and nominally under the Act, the mortgagee can't recover on the policy. Holy war, says Joe, laughing, that's a good one if old Shylock has landed. So the wife comes out top dog, what? Well, that's Heinz, says Bloom, for the wife's admirers. Whose admirers, says Joe? Oh, the wife's advisors, says Bloom.
And now our next reader is writer Sarah Harte.
Then he starts all confused, mucking it up about mortgager under the Act, like the Lord chance of giving it out on the bench, and for the benefit of the wife, and that a trust is created, but on the other hand, that Dignam owed Bridgman the money. And if now the wife or the widow contested the mortgagee's right, till he near had the head of me addled with his mortgager under the Act. He was bloody safe he wasn't run in himself under the Act that time as a rogue and vagabond, only he had a friend in court. Selling bazaar tickets are what you call it, Royal Hungarian Privilege Lottery. True as you're there. Oh, commend me to an Israelite, Royal and Privileged Hungarian Robbery. So Bob Doran comes lurching around asking Bloom to tell Mrs. Dignam he was sorry for her trouble, and he was very sorry about the funeral, and to tell her that he said, and everyone who knew him said, that there was never a truer, a finer than poor little Willie that's dead to tell her. Choking with bloody foolery, and shaking Bloom's hand, doing the tragic to tell her that, shake hands, brother, you're a rogue and I'm another. Let me, said he, so far presume upon our acquaintance, which, however slight it may appear, judged by the standard of mere time, is founded, as I hope and believe, on a sentiment of mutual esteem as to request of you this favour. But, should I have overstepped the limits of reserve, let the sincerity of my feelings be the excuse for my boldness. No, rejoined the other, I appreciate to the full the motives which actuate your conduct, and I shall discharge the office you entrust to me, consoled by the reflection that, though the errand be one of sorrow, this proof of your confidence sweetened in some measure the bitterness of the cup. Then suffer me to take your hand, said he. The goodness of your heart, I feel sure, will dictate to you, better than my inadequate words, the expressions which are most suitable to convey an emotion whose poignancy, were I to give vent to my feelings, would deprive me even of speech. And off with him, and out trying to walk straight, boozed at 5 o'clock. Night he was near being lagged, only Paddy Leonard knew the bobby, L14A. Blind the world up in a shebeen in Bride Street after closing time, fornicating with 2 shawls, and a bully on guard drinking porter out of teacups, and calling himself a friendly for the shawls, Joseph Manuo, and talking against the Catholic religion, and he serving Mass in Adam and Eve's when he was young, with his eyes shut, who wrote the New Testament and the Old Testament, and hugging and smuggling. And the 2 shawl killed with the laughing, picking his pockets the blood fool, and he spilling the porter all over the bed, and the 2 shaws screeching, laughing at one another. How is your testament? Have you got an Old Testament? Only Paddy was passing there, I tell you what. Then see him of a Sunday with his little concubine of a wife, and she wagging her tail up the aisle of chapel, with her patent boots on her no less, and her Violet, nice as pie, doing little lady. Jack Mooney's sister, and the old prostitute of a mother procuring rooms to street couples. Gob, Jack made a toe the line. Told if he didn't patch up the pot, Jesus, he'd kick the shit out of him. So Terry brought the 3 pints. Here, says Joe, do the honours. Here, citizen. Slawn lat, says he. Fortune, Joe, says I. Good health, citizen. Gob, he had his mouth halfway down the tumbler already. Want small fortune to keep him in drinks. Who is a long fellow running the Mayoralty, Alf, says Joe. Friend of yours, says Alf. Nannan, says Joe, the member. I won't mention any names, says Alf. I thought so, says Joe. I saw him up at that meeting now with Bloomfield MP, the cattle traders. Hairy Yupus, says the citizen, that exploded volcano, the darling of all countries and the idol of his own. So Joe starts telling the citizen about the foot and mouth disease and the cattle traders and taking action in the matter. And the citizen sending them all to write about, and Bloom coming out with his sheep dip for the scab and a hoose drench for coughing calves and the guaranteed remedy for timber tongue, because he was one time in a knacker's yard, walking about with his book and pencil. Here's my head and my heels are coming, till Joe Cuff gave him the order of the boot for giving lip to a grazier. Mr. Know-all, teach your grandmother how to milk ducks. Mr. Burke was telling me in the hotel the wife used to be in rivers of tears sometimes with Mrs. O'Dowd crying her eyes out with her 8 inches of fat all over. Couldn't loosen her farting strings, but old Cod's eye was waltzing around, or showing her how to do it. What's your programme today? Aye, humane methods. Because the poor animals suffer, and experts say, and the best known remedy that doesn't cause pain to the animal, and on the sore spot, administer gently. God, he'd have a soft hand under a hen. Ga, ga, gara, cluck, cluck, cluck. Black Liz is our hen. She lays eggs for us. When she lays her egg, she's so glad. Gara, cluck, cluck, cluck. Then comes good Uncle Leo. He puts his hand under Black Liz and takes a fresh egg. Ga, 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 gara, cluck, cluck, cluck. Anyhow, says Joe, Fielden and Nettie are going over tonight to London to ask about it on the floor of the House of Commons. Are you sure, says Bloom, the councillor is going? I want to see him as it happens. Well, he's going off by the mail boat, says Joe tonight. That's too bad, says Bloom. I wanted particularly. Perhaps only Mr. Field is going. I couldn't phone. No, you're sure? Nannan's going too, says Joe. the League told him to ask a question tomorrow about the Commission of Police forbidding Irish games in the park. What do you think of that, citizen? The slew in a heron. Mr. Cow Connick, multi-Farnham Nationalist. Arising out of the question of my honourable friend the member for Shillelagh, may I ask the right honourable gentleman whether the government has issued orders that these animals shall be slaughtered, though no medical evidence is forthcoming as to their pathological condition? Mr. Allforth, Tam O'Shant, Conservative. Honourable members are already in possession of the evidence produced before a committee of the whole House. I feel I cannot usefully add anything to that. The answer to the honourable member's question is the affirmative. Mr. O'Reilly O'Reilly Montati. Have similar orders been issued for the slaughter of human animals who dare to play Irish games in Phoenix Park? Mr. Allforth, the answer is in the negative. Mr. Cowconaker, has the right honourable gentleman's famous Mitchelstown Telegraph inspired the policy of gentlemen on Treasury bench? Mr. Allforth, I must have notice of that question. Mr. Stalewit, Bunkum Intendant, don't hesitate to shoot. Ironical opposition cheers. The Speaker, order, order. The House rises, cheers. There's the man, says Joe, that made the Gaelic sports revival. There he is sitting there, the man that got away James Stephens, the champion of all Ireland at putting the 16-pound shot. What was your best throw, citizen? Now, Backlash, says the citizen, letting on be modest. There was a time I was as good as the next fellow anyhow. Put it there, citizen, says Joe. You were and a bloody sight better. Is that really a fact, says Alf. Yes, says Bloom, that's well known. Do you not know that? So off they started about Irish sport and Shonin games the like of the lawn tennis and about hurley and putting the stone racy of the soil and building up a nation once again and all to that. And of course Bloom had to have his say too about if a fellow had a rower's heart, violent exercise was bad. I declare to my antimacassar, if you took up a straw from the bloody floor and if you said to Bloom, look at Bloom, do you see that straw? That's a straw. Declare to my aunt he'd talk about it for an hour so he would, and talk steady. A most interesting discussion took place in the ancient hall of Breen O'Kiernan's in Shroud na Bratnaviog, under the auspices of Slua na Heron, on the revival of ancient Gaelic sports and the importance of physical culture as understood in ancient Greece and ancient Rome and ancient Ireland for the development of the race. The venerable president of this noble order was in the chair and the attendance was of large dimensions. After an instructive discourse by the chairman, a magnificent oration, eloquently and forcefully expressed, a most interesting and instructive discussion of the usual high standard of excellence ensued as to the desirability of the revivability of the ancient games and sports of our ancient pan-Celtic forefathers. The well-known and highly respected worker in the cause of our old tongue, Mr. Joseph McCarthy Hines, made an eloquent appeal for the resuscitation of the ancient Gaelic sports and pastimes, practised morning and evening by Finn McCool, as calculated to revive the best traditions of manly strength and powers handed down to us from ancient ages. L. Bloom, who met with a mixed reception of applause and hisses, having espoused the negative, vocalist chairman brought the discussion to a close in response to repeated requests and hearty plaudits from all parts of a bumper house by a remarkably noteworthy rendering of the immortal Thomas Osborne Davis's evergreen verses, happily too familiar to need calling here, and Nation once again, in the execution of which the veteran patriot champion may be said without fear of contradiction have fairly excelled himself. The Irish Caruso Garibaldi was in superlative form, and his stentorian notes were heard to the greatest advantage in the time-honoured anthem, sung as only our citizen can sing it. His superb high-class vocalism, which by its super quality greatly enhanced his already international reputation, was vociferously applauded by the large audience, amongst which were to be noticed many prominent members of clergy, as well as representatives of the press and the bar and the other learned professions. The proceedings then terminated. Amongst the clergy present were the Very Reverend William Delaney, S.J. LLD, the Right Reverend Gerard Malloy, D.D., the Reverend P.J. Kavanagh, C.S.S.P., the Reverend T. Waters, C.C., the Reverend John M. Ivers, P.P., the Reverend P.J. Cleary, O.S.F., the Reverend L.J. Hickey, O.P., the Very Reverend Father Nicholas, O.S.F.C., the Very Reverend B. Gorman, O.D.C., the Reverend T. Maher, S.J., the Very Reverend James Murphy, S.J., the Reverend John Lavery, V.F., the Very Reverend William Doherty, D.D., the Reverend Peter Fagan, O.M., the Reverend T. Brannigan, O.S.A., the Reverend J. Flavin, C.C., the Reverend M.A. Hack, C.C., the Reverend W. Hurley, C.C., the Right Reverend Monsignor MacManus, V.D., the Reverend B.R. Slattery, O.M.I., the Very Reverend M.D. Galley, P.P., the Reverend F.T. Purcell, O.P., the Very Reverend Timothy Cannon Gorman, P.P., the Reverend J. Flanagan, C.C. The laity included P. Fay, D. Kirk, etc., etc.
And now I'm pleased to introduce novelist and playwright Declan Hughes.
Talking about violent exercise, says Alf. Were you at that Kyo Bennett match? No, says Joe. I heard so-and-so made a cool £100 over it, says Alf. Who? Blazes, says Joe. And says Bloom, what I meant about tennis, for example, is the agility training of the eye. Aye, Blazes, says Alf. He let out that Myler was on the beer to run up the odds, and he's swatting all the time. We know him, says the citizen. The traitor's son. We... Show for you, says Joe. And Bloom cuts in again about lawn tennis and circulation of the blood, asking Alf, don't you think, Bergen? Myler busted the floor with them, says Alf. Heenan and Sayers was only a blood fool to it. Hand him the father and mother of Eton. See the little kipper not up to his navel and the big fella swiping. God, he gave him one last puck in the wind. Queensberry rules and all. Made him puke, but he never ate.
It was a historic and a hefty battle when Eiler and Percy were scheduled to don the gloves of the purse of 50 sovereigns. Handicapped as he was by lack of poundage, Dublin's pet lamb made up for it by superlative skill in ringcraft. The final bout of fireworks was a grueling for both champions. The welterweight sergeant major tapped some lively claret in the previous mix-up, during which Kyo had been receiver general of rights and lefts, the artilleryman putting in some neat work on the pet's nose. Myler came on looking groggy. The soldier got to business, leading off with a powerful left jab, to which the Irish gladiator retaliated by shooting out a stiff one flush to the point of Bennett's jaw. The redcoat ducked, but the Dubliner lifted him with a left hook, the body punch being a fine one. The men came to handy grips. Myler quickly became busy and got his man under, the bout ending with the bulky man on the ropes, Myler punishing him. The Englishman, whose right eye was nearly closed, took his corner where he was liberally drenched with water, and when the bell went, came on gamey and brimful of pluck, confident of knocking out the Fissica Blanite in jig time. It was a fight to the finish, and the best man for it. The two fought like tigers, and excitement ran fever high. The referee twice cautioned pucking Percy for holding, but the pet was tricky and his footwork a treat to watch. After a brisk exchange of courtesies, during which a smart uppercut of the military man brought blood freely from his opponent's mouth, the lamb suddenly waded in all over his man and landed a terrific left to battling Bennett's stomach, flooring him flat. It was a knockout, clean and clever. Amid Ted's expectation, the Portobello bruiser was being counted out when Bennett's second, Ole Plotz Wetstein, threw in the towel, and the Santry boy was declared victor to the frenzied cheers of public, who broke through the ring ropes and fairly mobbed him with delight. He knows which side his bread is buttered, says Alf.
I hear he's running a concert tour now up in the north. He is, says Joe, isn't he? Who? Says Bloom. Ah, yes, that's quite true, yes. A kind of summer tour, you see, just a holiday. Mrs. B is bright, particular star, isn't she? Says Joe. My wife, says Bloom. She's singing, yes. I think it will be a success, too. He's an excellent man to organise. Excellent. Oh, begob, says I to myself, says I. That explains the milk in the coconut and absence of hair on the animal's chest. Blazes, doing the tootle on the flute. Concert tour. Dirty Dan, the Dodger's son off Island Bridge, sold the same horses twice over to the government to fight the Boers. Old what? I called about the poor and water rate, Mr. Boyne. You what? The water rate, Mr. Boylan. You what? That's the bucko that'll organise her. Take my tip twixt me and you, Caderish. Pride of Calpe's Rocky Mount, the raven-haired daughter of Tweedy. There grew she to peerless beauty, where Loquat and Ammon scent the air. The gardens of Alameda knew her step, the garths of olives knew and bowed. The chaste spouse of Leopold is she, Marion of the bountiful bosoms. And lo, there entered one of the clan of the O'Malloys, comely hero of white face, yet withal somewhat ruddy. His Majesty's counsel learned in the law, and with him the prince and heir of the noble line of Lambert. Hello, Ned. Hello, Alf. Hello, Jack. Hello, Joe. God save you, says the citizen. Save you kindly, says JJ. What'll it be, Ned? Half 'em, says Ned. So JJ ordered the drinks. Were you round at the court, says Joe. Yes, says JJ. He'll square that, Ned, says he. Hope so, says Ned. Now what were these two at? JJ getting him off the grand jury list, and the other giving him a leg over the stile. His name in Stubbs's. Playing cards, hobnobbing with flash toffs with a swank glass in their eye, drinking fizz, and he half smothered in Ritz and garnishy yours. Pawning his gold watch in Combs of Francis Street, where no one would know him, in private office when I was there pisser, releasing his boots out of the pop. What's your name, sir? Dunn, says he. Aye, and Dunn, says I. Gob, he'll come home by whipping cross one of these days, I'm thinking. Did you see that bloody lunatic Breen round there, says Alf. U.P. up. Yes, says JJ. Looking for a private detective. Aye, says Ned, and he wanted right go round to address the court, and Corny Kelleher got round him, telling him to get the handwriting examined first. £10,000, says Alf, laughing. God, I'd give anything to hear him before the judge and jury. Was it you did it, Alf, says Joe. The truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you, Jimmy Johnson. Me, says Alf. Don't cast your assertions on my character. Whatever statement you make, says Joe, will be taken down in evidence against you. Of course, an action would lie, says JJ. It implies he is not compos mentis. U.P. up. Compass your eye, says Alf, laughing. Do you know that he's bam? Look at his head. You know that some mornings he has to get his hat on with a shoehorn. Yes, says JJ, but the truth of a libel is no defence to an indictment for publishing it in the eyes of the law. Alf, says Joe. Still, says Bloom, on account of the poor woman, I mean his wife. Pity about her, says the citizen, or any other woman marries a half and half. How half and half, says Bloom? Do you mean he's half and half, I mean, says the citizen. A fella that's neither fish nor flesh, nor good red herring, says Joe. That's what I mean, says the citizen. A pishog, if you know what that is. Gob, I saw there was trouble coming. And Bloom explained he meant on account of it being cruel for the wife having to go round after the old stuttering fool. Cruelty to animals, so it is, to let that bloody poverty-stricken Breen out on grass with a beard out tripping him, bringing down the rain. And she with her no cock-a-hoop after she married him, because a cousin of his old fellas was pew opener to the Pope. Picture of him on the wall with his smash-all Sweeney's moustaches. The Signor Beanie from Summerhill, the Italiano, Papal Zouave, the Holy Father, had left the quay and gone to Moss Street. And who was he, tell us? A nobody, 2 pair back in passages at 7 shillings a week, and he covered all kinds of breastplates, bidding defiance to the world. And moreover, says JJ, a postcard is publication. is held to be sufficient evidence of malice in the test case Sadbo versus Hole. In my opinion, an action might lie. 6 and 8pence, please. Who wants your opinion? Let us drink our pints in peace. Gob, we won't even be let do that much itself. Well, good health, Jack, says Ned. Good health, Ned, says JJ. There he is again, says Joe. Where? Says Alf. And begob, there he was, passing the door with his books under his oster and his wife beside him, and Corny Kelleher with his walleye looking in as they went past, talking to him like a father trying to sell him a second-hand coffin. How did that kind of swindle case go off, says Joe. Commanded, says JJ. One of the bottle-nosed fraternity it was, went by the name of James Watt, alias Sphero, alias Spark and Spiro. Put an ad in the papers, saying to give a passage to Canada for 20 bob. What? Do you see any green in the white of my eye? Of course it was a bloody Barney. What? Swindled them all. Skivvies and bothers from the county Meath, aye, and his own kidney too. JJ was telling us there was an ancient Hebrew, Zaretsky or something, weeping in the witness box with his hat on him, swearing by the holy Moses he was stuck for 2 quid. Who tried the case, says Joe? Recorder, says Ned. Poor old Sir Frederick, says Alf, you can cod him up to the 2 eyes. Harte is big as a lion, says Ned. Tell him a tale of woe about arrears of rent and a sick wife and a squad of kids. And faith, he'll dissolve in tears on the bench. Aye, says Alf, Reuben J was bloody lucky he didn't clap him in the dock the other day for suing poor little Gumley that's minding stones for the corporation the near Butt Bridge. And he starts taking off the old recorder, letting on to cry, a most scandalous thing. This poor, hard-working man. How many children? 10, did you say? Yes, your worship. And my wife has the typhoid. And a wife with typhoid fever. Scandalous. Leave the court immediately, sir. No, sir, I'll make no order for payment. How dare you, sir, come up before me and ask me to make an order? A poor, hard-working, industrious man. I dismiss the case.
Next read from Dublin is James Joyce Centre scholar Terence Killeen.
And whereas on the 16th day of the month of the Ox-Eye Goddess, and in the 3rd week after the feast day of the Holy and Undivided Trinity, the daughter of the skies, the Virgin Moon, being then in her 1st quarter, it came to pass that those learned judges repaired them to the halls of law. There Master Courtenay, sitting in his own chamber, gave his rede, and Master Justice Andrews, sitting without a jury in the probate court, weighed well and pondered the claims of the first chargeant upon the property in the matter of the will propounded and final testamentary disposition in re the real and personal estate of the late lamented Jacob Halliday, vintner, deceased, versus Livingstone, an infant, of unsound mind, and another. And to the solemn court of Green Street there came Sir Frederick the falconer. And he sat him there about the hour of 5 o'clock to administer the law of the Brehons at the commission for all that and those parts to be holden in and for the county of the city of Dublin. And there sat with him the High Synedrin of the 12 tribes of Eir, for every tribe 1 man, of the tribe of Patrick, and of the tribe of Hugh, and of the tribe of Owen, and of the tribe of Con, and of the tribe of Oscar, and of the tribe of Fergus, and of the tribe of Finn, and of the tribe of Dermot, and of the tribe of Cormac, and of the tribe of Kevin, and of the tribe of Quailta, and of the tribe of Ossian, there being in all 12 good men and true. And he conjured them by him who died on rood, that they should well and truly try, and true deliverance make in the issue joined between their sovereign lord the king, and the prisoner at the bar, and true verdict give according to the evidence, so help them God, and kiss the book. And they rose in their seats, those 12 of Iyar, and they swore by the name of him who is from everlasting, that they would do his right wiseness. And straightway the minions of the law led forth from their dungeon keep one whom the sleuth-hounds of justice had apprehended in consequence of information received. And they shackled him hand and foot, and would take of him ne bail ne memprise, but preferred a charge against him, for he was a malefactor. Those are nice things, says the citizen, coming over here to Ireland, filling the country with bugs. So Bloom lets on he heard nothing, and he starts talking with Joe, telling him he needn't trouble about that little matter till the first, but if he would just say a word, Mr. Crawford. And so Joe swore high and holy by this and by that he'd do the devil and all. Because you see, says Bloom, for an advertisement you must have a petition. That's the whole secret. Rely on me, says Joe. Swindling the peasants, says the citizen, and the poor of Ireland. We want no more strangers in our house. Oh, I'm sure that will be all right, Hines, says Bloom. It's just that Keys, see. Consider that done, says Joe. Very kind of you, says Bloom. The strangers, says the citizen. Our own fault. We let them come in. We brought them. The adulterers and robbers here. Decree easy, says J.J. And Bloom letting on to be awfully deeply interested in nothing, a spider's web in the corner behind the barrel, and the citizen scowling after him, and the old dog at his feet looking up to know who'd bite and when. A dishonoured wife, says the citizen, that's what's the cause of all our misfortunes. And here she is, says Elf, that was giggling over the police gazette with Terry on the counter, in all her war paint. Give us a squint at her, says I. And what was it, only one of the smutty Yankee pictures Terry borrows off of Corny Kelleher? Secrets for enlarging your private parts. Misconduct of society, Bell. Norman W. Tupper, wealthy Chicago contractor, finds pretty but faithless wife in lap of Officer Taylor. Bell in her bloomers misconducting herself, and her fancy man feeling for her tickles, and Norman W. Tupper bouncing in with his pea-shooter just in time to be late after she doing the trick of the loop with Officer Taylor. Oh, Jakers, Jenny, says Joe, how short your shirt is. There's hair, Joe, says I. Get a queer old tail end of corned beef off of that one, what? So anyhow in came John Wise Nolan and Lennon with him, with a face on him as long as a late breakfast. Well, says the citizen, what's the latest from the scene of action? What did those tinkers in the City Hall at their caucus meeting decide about the Irish language? Oh, Nolan, clad in shiny armour, low bending made obeisance to the puissant and high and mighty chief of all Erin, and did him to wit of that which had befallen, how that the grave elders of the most obedient city, second of the realm, had met them in the Tholsel, and there, after due prayers to the gods who dwell in ether supernal, had taken solemn counsel whereby they might, if so be it might be, bring once more into honour among mortal men the winged speech of the sea-divided gale. It's on the march, said the citizen, to hell with the bloody brutal Sassenachs and their patois. So JJ puts in a word doing the toff about one story was good till you heard another, and linking facts and the Nelson policy, putting your blind eye to the telescope and drawing up a bill of attainder to impeach a nation, and Bloom trying to back him up, moderation and botheration, and their colonies and their civilization. Their civilization, you mean, says the citizen. To hell with them. The curse of a good-for-nothing god light sideways on the bloody thick-lugged sons of whores gets. No music and no art and no literature worthy of the name. Any civilization they have, they stole from us. Tongue-tied sons of bastards, ghosts. The European family, says JJ. They're not European, said the citizen. I was in Europe with Kevin Egan at Paris. You wouldn't see a trace of them or their language anywhere in Europe, except in a cabinet d'essence. And says John Wise, full many a flower is born to blush and seen. And says Lennon, that knows a bit of the lingo, conspuez les Anglais, perfide Albion. He said, and then lifted he in his rude, great, brawny, strengthy hands the mether of dark, strong, foamy ale, and, uttering his tribal slogan, Love Darach Abu, he drank to the undoing of his foes, a race of mighty, valorous heroes, rulers of the waves, who sit on thrones of alabaster, silent as the deathless gods. What's up with you, says I to Lenihan. You look like a fellow that's lost a bob and found a tanner. Gold cup, says he. Who won, Mr. Lenihan, says Harry. Throwaway, says he, at 20-1. A rank outsider, and the rest nowhere. And Bass's mare, says Terry. Still running, says he. We're all in a cart. Boyne plunged £2 on my tip sceptre for himself and a lady friend. I had half a crown myself, says Terry, on Zinfandel that Mr. Flynn gave me, Lord Howard of Walden's. 20-1, says Lenihan, such is life in an outhouse. Throwaway, says he, takes the biscuit and talking about bunions. Frailty, thy name is Sceptre. So he went over to the biscuit tin Bob Doran left to see if there was anything could lift from the nod, the old cur after him backing his luck, his mangy snout up. Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard. Not there, my child, says he. Keep your pecker up, says Joe. She'd have won the money only for the other dog. And JJ and the citizen arguing about law and history, Bloom sticking in an odd word. Some people, says Bloom, can see the mote in others' eyes, but they can't see the beam in their own. Raw mish, says the citizen. There's no one as blind as the fellow that won't see, if you know what that means. Where are our missing 20 millions of Irish should be here today instead of 4, our lost tribes, and our potteries and textiles, the finest in the whole world, and our wool that was sold in Rome in the time of Juvenal, and our flax and our damask from the looms of Antrim, and our Limerick lace, our tanneries and our white flint glass down there by Ballybock, and our Huguenot poplin that we have since Jacquard Lyon, and our woven silk and our Foxford tweeds and ivory raised point from the Carmelite convent in New Ross. Nothing like it in the whole wide world. Where are the Greek merchants that came through the pillars of Hercules, the Gibraltar now grabbed by the foe of mankind, with gold and Tyrian purple to sell in Wexford at the fair of Carmen? Read Tacitus and Ptolemy, even Geraldus Cambrensis. Wine, peltries, Connemara marble, silver from Tipperary, second to none. our far-famed horses even today, the Irish hobbies, with King Philip of Spain offering to pay customs duties for the right to fish in our waters. What do the yellow Johns of Anglia owe us for our ruined trade and our ruined hearts? And the beds of Barrow and Shannon they won't deepen with millions of acres of marsh and bog to make us all die of consumption. As treeless as Portugal will be soon, says John Wise, or Heligoland with its one tree, if something is not to reforest the land. Larches, firs, all the trees of the conifer family are going fast. I was reading a report of Lord Castletown's. Save them, says a citizen, the giant ash of Galway and the chieftain elm of Kildare with a 40-foot bole and an acre foliage. Save the trees of Ireland for the future men of Ireland on the fair hills of Éire, O. Europe has its eyes on you, said Lenihan. Fashionable international world attended en masse this afternoon at the wedding of the Chevalier Jean-Louis de Nolan, Grand High Chief Ranger of the Irish National Foresters, with his fir conifer of Pine Valley. Lady Sylvester Elmshade, Mrs. Barbara Lovebirch, Mrs. Paul Ash, Mrs. Holly Hazeleyes, Miss Daphne Bays, Miss Dorothy Canebrake, Mrs. Clyde Twelvetrees, Mrs. Rowan Green, Mrs. Helen Vinegetting, Miss Virginia Creeper, Miss Gladys Beach, Miss Olive Garth, Miss Blanche Maple, Mrs. Maud Mahogany, Miss Myra Myrtle, Miss Priscilla Elderflower, Miss B. Honeysuckle, Miss Grace Poplar, Miss O. Mimosa San, Miss Rachel Cedar Frond, Mrs. Lillian and Viola Lilac, Miss Timidity Aspinall, Mrs. Kitty Dewey Moss, Miss May Hawthorne, Mrs. Gloria Palm, Mrs. Leanna Forrest, Mrs. Arabella Blackwood, and Mrs. Norma Hollyoak of Oakhome Regis graced ceremony by their presence. The bride, who was given away by her father, the McConifer of the Glands, looked exquisitely charming in a creation carried out in green mercerized silk, moulded on an underslip of gloaming grey, sat with a yoke of broad emerald, and finished with triple flounce of darker-hued fringe, scheme being relieved by bretelles and hip insertions of acorn bronze. The maids of honour, Miss Larch Conifer and Miss Spruce Conifer, sisters of the bride, wore very becoming costumes in the same tone, a dainty motif of plume rose being worked into the pleats in a pinstripe and repeated capriciously in jade-green tucks in the form of heron feathers of pale-tinted coral. Senor Enrique Flor presided at the organ with his well-known ability and, in addition to the prescribed numbers of the nuptial mass, played a new and striking arrangement of Woodman Spare That Tree at the conclusion of the service. On leaving the church of St. Fiacre in Harte after the papal blessing, the happy pair were subjected to a playful crossfire of hazelnuts, beech-mast, bay leaves, catkins of willow, ivy tod, holly berries, mistletoe sprigs, and quicken shoots. Mr. and Mrs. Wise Conifer Nolan will spend a quiet honeymoon in the Black Forest.
Our next reader is writer John Boyne, who wrote that wonderful novel, Boy in the Striped Pyjamas.
And our eyes are on Europe, says the citizen. We have trade with Spain, the French, and with the Flemings before those mongrels pupped. Spanish ale in Galway, wine bark on the wine dark waterway. And will again, says Joe. And with the help of the Holy Mother God we will again, says the citizen, clapping his thigh. Our harbours that are empty will be full again, Queenstown, Kinsale, Galway, Axod Bay, Ventry in the Kingdom of Kerry, Begs, the third largest harbour in the wide world, with a fleet of masts of the Galway Lynches and the Can O'Reillys and the O'Kennedys of Dublin, when the Earl of Desmond could make a treaty with the Emperor Charles V himself. And will again, says he, when the first Irish battleship is seen breasting the wave, Tudors, harps, no, the oldest flag afloat, the flag of the province of Desmond and Thomond, 3 crowns on a blue field, the 3 sons of Milesius. And he took the last swig out of the pine moya, all wind and piss like a tan-haired cat, cows and connacht to long horns. As much as his bloody life is worth to go down and address his tall talk to the assembled multitude in Shagolden, where he daren't show his nose with the Molly Maguires looking for him to let daylight through him for grabbing the holding of an evicted tenant. Hear, hear to that, said John Wise. What'll you have? Imperial yeomanry, says Lenehan, to celebrate the occasion. Half one, Terry, says John Wise, and a hands up. Terry, are you asleep? Yes, sir, says Terry. Small whiskey and bottle of Allsop. Right, sir. Hanging over the bloody paper with Alf, looking for spicy bits, instead of attending to the general public picture of a butting match, trying to crack their bloody skulls. One chap going for the other with his head down like a bull at a gate. And another one, Black Beast burned in Omaha, gah. A lot of dead wood dicks in slouch hats, and they firing a sambo strung up on a tree with his tongue out and a bonfire under him. God, they ought to drown him in the sea after and electrocute and crucify him to make sure of their job. But what about the fighting navy, says Ned, that keeps our foes at bay? I'll tell you about it, says the citizen. Hell upon earth it is. Read the revelations that's going on in the papers about flogging on the training ships at Portsmouth. A fellow writes that calls himself Disgusted One. So he starts telling us about corporal punishment, about the crew of tars and officers and rear admirals drawn up in cocked hats, and the parson with his Protestant Bible to witness punishment, and a young lad brought out, howling for a ma, and they tie him down on the butt end of a gun. A rump and dozen, says the citizen. Is that what that old ruffian Sir John Beresford called, if but the modern God's Englishman calls it caning on the breach? And says John Wise, 'tis a custom more honoured in the breach than in the observance. Then he was telling us the master-at-arms comes along with a long cane, and he draws out and flogs the bloody backside off of the poor lad till he yelled, "Mela murder." That's your glorious British Navy, says the citizen, that bosses the earth. The fellows that never will be slaves, with the only hereditary chamber on the face of God's earth, and their land in the hands of a dozen game hogs and cotton ball barons. That's the great empire they boast about, of drudges and wet serfs, on which the sun never rises, says Joe. A tragedy of it, says the citizen. They believe it. The unfortunate yahoos believe it. They believe in Rod, the Scourger Almighty, creator of hell upon earth, and in Jackie Carr, the son of a gun, who was conceived of unholy boast, born of the fighting navy, suffered under rump and dozen, was scarified, flayed and curried, yelled like bloody hell. The third day he rose again from the bed, steered into heaven, sitteth on his beam-head, till further orders, whence he shall come drudge for a living and be paid. But, says Bloom, isn't discipline the same everywhere? I mean, wouldn't it be the same here if you put force against force? Didn't I tell you, as true as I'm drinking this porter, if he was at his last gasp, he tried to downface you, that dying was living? We'll put force against force, says the citizen. We have our greater Ireland beyond the sea. They were driven out of house and home in the Black 47. Their mud cabins and their sheilings by the roadside were laid low by the battering ram, and the Times rubbed its hands and told a white-livered Saxon there would soon be as few Irish in Ireland as redskins in America. Even the Grand Turk sent his piastres. But the Sassenach tried to starve the nation at home while the land was full of crops that the British hyenas bought and sold in Rio de Janeiro. They drove out the peasants in hordes. 20,000 of them died in their coffin ships. But those that came to the land of the free remember the land of bondage. And they will come again, and with a vengeance, no cravens, the son of Granwell, the champions of Kathleen Ní Houlihan. Perfectly true, says Bloom. But my point was, we are a long time waiting for that day, citizen, says Ned, since the poor old woman told us that the French were on the sea and landed at Killala. Aye, says John Wise. We fought for the Royal Stuarts that reneged us against the Williamites, and they betrayed us. Remember Limerick and the broken Treatstone? We gave our best blood to France and Spain, the wild geese, Fontenoy, eh? And Sarsfield, and O'Donnell, Duke Tetuan in Spain, and Ulysses Brown of Hamu, that was Field Marshal to Maria Theresa. But what did we ever get for it? The French, says the citizen, said dancing masters? Do you know what that is? They were never worth a roasted fart to Ireland. And when they tried to take an entente cordiale now at Tepe's dinner party, perfidious Albion. Firebrands of Europe, and they always were. Conspuez le Français, says Lehan, nobbling his beer. And as for the Prussians and the Hanoverians, says Joe, haven't we had enough of those sausage-eating bastards on the throne, from George the Elector down to German lad and the flatulent old bitch that's dead? Jesus, I had to laugh the way he came out with that about the old one with the winkers on her lying drunk in her royal palace every night of God, old Vic, with her jorum of mountain dew and her coachman carting up her body bones to roll into bed, and she pulling him by the whiskers and singing him old bits of songs about Erin on the Ron, and come where the booze is cheaper. Well, says JJ, we have Edward the Peacemaker now. Tell to a fool, says the citizen. There's a bloody sight more pox than pax about that boyo, Edward Guelph Wettin. And what do you think, says Joe, the holy boys, priests and bishops of Ireland, doing up his rune Maynooth in his satanic majesty's racing colours and sticking up pictures of all the horses his jockeys rode, the Earl of Dublin no less. They ought to have stuck up all the women he rode himself, says Little Elf. And says JJ, considerations of space influenced their lordship's decision. Will you try another, citizen, says Joe. Yes, sir, says he, I will. You, says Joe. Beholden to you, Joe, says I. May your shadow never go less. Repeat that dose, says Joe. Bloom was talking and talking with John Wise, and he quite excited with his dun-ducky mud-coloured mug on him and his old plum eyes running about. Persecution, says he. All the history of the world is full of it, perpetuating national hatred among nations. But do you know what a nation means, says John Wise. Yes, says Bloom. What is it? Says John Wise. A nation, says Bloom. A nation is the same people living in the same place. By God then, says Ned, laughing, if that's so, I'm a nation, for I'm living in the same place for the past 5 years. So, of course, everyone will laugh at Bloom, says he, trying to make muck out of it. Or also living in different places. That covers my case, says Joe. What is your nation, if I may ask? Asks the citizen. Ireland, says Bloom. I was born here, Ireland. The citizen said nothing, only clipped the spit out of his gullets, and gob, he spat a red bank oyster out of it right in the corner. After you with the push, Joe, says he, take out his handkerchief to swab himself dry. Here you are, citizen, says Joe. Take that in your right hand and repeat after me the following words. The much treasured and intricately embroidered ancient Irish face cloth attributed to Solomon of Droma and Manus Tommelfach Og Macdonough, authors of the Book of Ballymote, was then carefully produced and called forth prolonged admiration. No need to dwell on the legendary beauty of the corner pieces, the acme of art, wherein one can distinctly discern each of the 4 evangelists in turn, presenting to each of the 4 masters his evangelical symbol, a bog oak sceptre, a North American puma, a far nobler king of beasts than the British article, be it said in passing, a Kerry calf, and a golden eagle from Carrantoul. The scenes depicted on the emunctory field, showing our ancient duns and raths and cromlechs and grinons and seats of learning and maledictive stones, are as wonderfully beautiful and the pigments as delicate as when the Sligo illuminators gave free rein to their artistic fantasy long, long ago in the time of Barnesides. Glendalough, the lovely lakes of Killarney, the ruins of Clonmacnoise, Cong Abbey, Glenina and the 12 Pins, Ireland Eye, the Green Hills of Talla, Crowpatrick, the brewery of Messrs. Arthur Guinness, Son and Company Limited, Loch Ness Banks, the Ale of Avoca, Isolde's Tower, Mappa's Obelisk, Sir Patrick Dunn's Hospital, Cape Clear, the Glen of Arlow, Lynch's Castle, the Scotch House, Rathdown Union Workhouse at Aucklandstown, Tullamore Jail, Castle Connell Rapids, Killybally McShonakill, Cross at Monaster Boyce, Jury's Hotel, St Patrick's Pertry, the Salmon Leap, Maynooth College Factory, Kerr's Hole, the 3 birthplaces of the first Duke of Wellington, the Rock of Cashel, the Bog of Anne, the Henry Street Warehouse, Fingal's Cave. All these moving scenes are still there for us today, rendered more beautiful still by the waters of sorrow which have passed over them and by the rich incrustations of time.
And now we have Jack Harte, who is a novelist and writer and also founder of the Irish Writers' Centre.
Show us over the drink, said I. Which is which? That's mine, says Joe, as the devil says to the dead policeman. And I belong to a race too, says Bloom, that is hated and persecuted. Also now, this very moment, this very instant. God, he near burnt his fingers with the butt of his old cigar. Robbed, says he, plundered, insulted, persecuted, taking what belongs to us by right. At this very moment, says he, putting up his fist. Like slaves or cattle. Are you talking about the New Jerusalem? Says the citizen. I'm talking about injustice, says Blue. Right, says Joyce. Stand up to it then, with force, like men. That's an almanac picture for you. Mark for a soft-nosed bullet, old lardy face, standing up to the business end of a gun. God, he'd adorn a sweeping brush, so he would. If he only had a nurse's apron on him, and then he collapses all of a sudden, twisting round, all the opposite, as limp as a wet rag. But it's no use, says he. Force, hatred, history, all that. That's not life for men and women. Insult and hatred. And everybody knows that it's the very opposite of that that is really life. What? Says Alf. Love, says Bloom. I mean the opposite of hatred. I must go now, says he to John Wise, just round the corner, just round to the court for a moment, to see if Martin is there. If he comes, just say I'll be back in a second, just a moment. Who's hindering you? And off he pops like greased lightning. A new apostle to the Gentiles, said the citizen, universal love. Well, says John Wise, isn't that what we're told? You love your neighbours. That chap, says the citizen, beggar my neighbour is his model. Love, Maya. He's a nice pattern for Romeo and Juliet. Love loves, love. Nurse loves the new cast. Constable 14A loves Mary Kelly. Gertie MacDowell loves the boy that has a bicycle. M.E. loves a fair gentleman. Lai Chai Han lovey up Kissy Chapu Chow. Jumbo the elephant loves Alice the elephant. Old Mr. Verscoyle with his ear trumpet loves old Mrs. Verscoyle with the turned-in eye. The man in the brown mackintosh loves a lady who is dead. His Majesty the King loves Her Majesty the Queen. Mrs. Norman W. Tupper loves Officer Taylor. You love a certain person, and this person loves that other person because everybody loves somebody, but God loves everybody. Well, Joe, says I, your very good health and song. More power, citizen. Hurrah there, says Joe. The blessing of God and Mary and Patrick on you, says the citizen. and he ups with pint to wet his whistle. We know those cantors, says he, preaching and picking your pocket. What about sanctimonious Cromwell and his Ironsides? Put the women and children of Drogheda to the sword with the Bible text, God is love, pasted round the mouth of his cannon. The Bible. Did you read that skit in the United Irishman today about the Zulu chief that's visiting England? What's that, says Joe. So the citizen takes up one of his paraphernalia of papers and he starts reading out. A delegation of the chief cotton magnates of Manchester was presented yesterday to His Majesty the Alaki of Arbiacuta by gold-stick-in-witting Lord Walkup on Eggs, to tender to His Majesty the heartfelt thanks of British traders for the facilities afforded them in his dominions. The delegation partook of luncheon, the conclusion of which the dusky potentate, in the course of a happy speech, freely translated by the British chaplain, the Reverend Ananias, praise God, Bourbons, tendered his best thanks to Massa Walkup, and emphasised the cordial relations existing between Abiacuta and British Empire, stating that he treasured as one of his dearest possessions an illuminated Bible, the volume of the Word of God and secret of England's greatness, graciously presented to him by the white chief woman, the great squaw Victoria, the personal dedication from the august hand of the royal donor. The Alaki then drank a loving cup of first-shot Ishaba to the toast, black and white, from the soul of his immediate predecessor in the dynasty of Kakachakachak, surnamed 40 was. After which he visited the chief factory of Cortonopolis and signed his mark in a visitor's book, subsequently executing an old Abiacutic war dance, in course of which he swallowed several knives and forks amid hilarious applause from the girled hands. Widow woman, says Ned, I wouldn't doubt her. Wonder did he put that Bible to the same use as I would? Same, only more so, says Lennon. And thereafter in that fruitful land, the broad-leaved mango flourished exceedingly. Is that by Griffith, says John Wise. No, says the citizen, it's not Zain Shangana, it's only initial P. And a very good initial too, says Joe. That's how it's worked, says the citizen. Trade follows the flag. Well, says JJ, if they're any worse than those Belgians in the Congo Free State, they must be bad. Did you read that report by a man? What's this his name is? Casement, says the citizen. He's an Irishman. Yes, that stands, says JJ. Raping the women and girls and flogging the natives on the belly to squeeze all the red rubber they can out of them. I know where he's gone, says Lena, cracking his fingers. Who, says I. Bloom, says he. The courthouse is a blind. He had a few bob on throwaway, and he's gone to gather in shekels. Is it that white-eyed Kaffir, says the citizen, that never backed a horse in anger in his life? That's where he's gone, says Lennon. I met Bantam Lyons come to back that horse, only I put him off it, and he told me Bloom gave him the tip. Bet you what you like, he has 100 shillings to fave on. He's the only man in Dublin has it. A dark horse. He's a bloody dark horse himself, says Joe. Mind, Joe, says I, show us the entrance out. There you are, says Terry. Goodbye, Ireland, I'm going to Gort. So I went round to the back of the yard to punch. My God, 100 shillings to 5. While I was letting off my throwaway, 20 to letting off my load. God was I to myself. I knew he was uneasy in his 2 pints of Joe and 1 in Slattery's off in his mind to get off the mark to 100 shillings is 5 quid. And when they were in the dark horse, Pisser Burke was telling me, card party and letting on that the child was sick. God must have done about a gallon. Flatty arse of a wife sneaking down the tube. She's better, or she's... All a plan so he could vermouth at the pool if he won. Jesus, full up I was. Trading without a licence. Ireland, my nation, says he. Never be up those bloody... There's the list of it. Jerusalem. Cuckoos. So anyhow, when I got back, they were at it. Ding dong. John Y. saying it was Bloom gave the idea for Sinn Féin Griffith to put in his paper all kinds of gerrymandering, packed jury and swindling the taxes off the government and appointing consuls all over the world to walk about selling Irish industries, robbing Peter to pay Paul. God, that puts the bloody kibosh on it if old Sloppy Eyes is mucking up the show. Give us a bloody chance. God save Ireland from likes of that bloody mouseabout. Mr. Bloom with his arjaw, barjaw, and his old fella before him, perpetrating frauds, old Methuselah Bloom, the robbing bagman that poisoned himself with prussic acid after he swamping the country with baubles and his penny diamonds, loaned by post on easy terms, any amount of money advanced, on note of hand, distance no object, no security. God, he's like Lanty McHale's goat that would go a piece of the road with everyone. Well, it's a fact, as John Wise, and here's the man now that'll tell you all about it, Martin Cunningham. Sure enough, the castle car drove up with Martin on it, and Jack Power with them, and a fellow named Crofter or Crofton, pensioner out of the Collector General's, an Orangeman Blackburn does have on the registration, and he drawing his pay. Or Crawford, gallivanting around country at the King's expense. Our travellers reached the rustic hostelry and alighted from their palfreys. Ho, varlet, cried he, who by his mien seemed the leader of the party, saucy knave, to us. So saying, he knocked loudly out with his sword hilt upon the open lattice. Mine host came forth at the summons, girding him with his tabard. Give you good end, my master, said he with an obsequious bow. Bestir thyself, sirrah, cried he who had knocked. Look to our steeds, and for ourselves, give us of your best, for a faith we need it. Lack a day, good masters, said the host. My poor house is but a bare larder. I know not what to offer your lordships. How now, fellow, cried the second of the party, a man of pleasant countenance. So servest thou the king's messengers, Master Tapton? An instantaneous change o'erspread the landlord's visage. Cry you mercy, he said humbly, and you be the king's messengers. God shield his majesty. You shall not want for aught. The king's friends, God bless his majesty, shall not go a-fasting in my house, I warrant me. Then about, cried the traveller who had not spoken, a lusty trencherman by his aspect, has aught to give us. Mine host bowed again as he made answer. What say you, good masters, to a swab pigeon pasty, some collops of venison, a salaville, with crisp hog's bacon, a boar's head with pistachios, a basin of jolly custard, a medlar tansy, and a flagon of old Rhenish? Gazooks, cried the last speaker, that likes me well, pistachios. Aha, cried he of the pleasant countenance, poor house and a bare larder, quotha, 'tis a merry rogue. So in comes Martin, asking where was Bloom. Where is he, says Lenan, defrauding widows and orphans? Isn't that a fact, says John Wise, what I was telling the citizen about Bloom and the Sinn Féin? That's so, says Martin, so they allege. Who made those allegations, says Alf. I, says Joe, I'm the alligator. And after all, says John Weiss, why can't a Jew love his country like the next fellow? Why not, says JJ, when he's quite sure what the country is? Is he a Jew or a Gentile, or a Holy Roman, or a swaddler, or what the hell is he, says Ned, or who is he? No offence, Crofton. We don't want him, says Crofter, the Orangeman, or Presbyterian.
And our final reader is writer Kevin Barry, recent winner of the Dublin Impact Award.
Who is Junius, says JJ. He's a perverted Jew, said Martin, from a place in Hungary. And it was he drew up all the plans according to the Hungarian system. We know that in the castle. Isn't he a cousin of Bloom, the dentist, says Jack Power. Not all, says Martin, only namesakes. His father was Virag. The father's name poisoned himself. He changed it by Deedpol, the father did. That's the new Messiah for Ireland, says the citizen. Island of saints and sages. Well, we're still waiting for their Redeemer, says Martin. For that matter, so are we. Yes, says JJ, and every male that's born, they think it may be their Messiah, and every Jew is in a tall state of excitement, I believe, till he knows if he's a father or a mother. Expecting every moment would be his next, says Linehan. Oh, by God, says Ned, you should have seen Bloom before that son of his that died was born. I met him one day in the South City market buying a tin of Neve's food 6 weeks before the wife was delivered. In ventre sa mère, says JJ. Do you call that a man? Says the citizen. I wonder, did he ever put it out of sight? Says Joe. Well, there were 2 children born anyhow, says Jack Power. And who does suspect? Says the citizen. Gob, there's many a true word spoken in jest. One of those mixed middlings he is. Lying up in the hotel, Pisser was telling me once a month with headache, got totty with her curses. Do you know what I'm telling you? It would be an act of God to take a hold of a fella the like of that and throw him in bloody sea. Justifiable homicide, so it would. Then sloping out his 5 quid while putting up a pint of stuff like a man. Give us your blessing. Not as much as would blind your eye. Charity to the neighbour, says Mark. But where is he? We can't wait. A wolf in cheap clothing, says the citizen. That's what he is. Virag from Hungary. Esurus, I call him. Cursed by God. Have you time for a brief libation, Martin, says Ned. Only one, says Martin. We must be quick, JJ and S. You, Jack, Crofton, 3 half-ones, Terry. St. Patrick would want to land again Ballykindler and convert us, says the citizen, after allowing things like that to contaminate our shores. Well, said Martin, rapping for his glass, God bless all, here is my prayer. Amen, says the citizen. I'm sure he will, says Joe. And at the sound of the sacred bell, headed by a crucifer with acolytes, turifiers, butt-bearers, readers, osterite, deacons and sub-deacons, the blessed company drew nigh of metered abbots and priors and guardians and monks and friars, the monks of Benedict of Spoleto, Carthusians and Camaldesi, Cistercians and Olivetans, Oratarians and Valambrosans, and the friars of Augustine, Bridgetines, Premonstratarians, Servite, Trinitarians, and the children of Peter Nalasso, and therewith from Carmel Mount the children of Elijah, prophet, led by Albert Bishop, and by Teresa of Avila, Calct, and other, and friars brown and grey, sons of Pope Francis, Capuchins, Cordeliers, Minimes, and Observants, and the daughters of Clara, and the sons of Dominic, the friar preachers, and sons of Venton, and the monks of St. Walston, and Ignatius his children, and the confraternity of the Christian mothers led by the Reverend Brother Edmund Ignatius Rice. And after came all saints and martyrs, virgins and confessors, Saint Cyr and Saint Isidore Arator, and Saint James de Les, and Saint Focus of Sinope, and Saint Julian Hospitator, and Saint Felix de Cantalis, and Saint Simon Stylites, and Saint Stephen Protomartyr, and Saint John of God, and Saint Ferial, and Saint Lugard, and Saint Theodosius, and Saint Volmar, Saint Richard, and Vincent de Paul, and Martin de Tode, and Martin de Tours, and Alfred, and Joseph, and Dennis, and Cornelius, and Leopold, and Bernard, and Saint Turnus, and Saint Edward, and Saint Owen Caniculus, and Saint Anonymous, and Saint Eponymous, and Saint Pseudonymous, and Saint Homonymus, and Saint Paronymus, and Saint Synonymous, and Saint Lamsotul, and James Dingle, and Compostela, and Saint Columcille, and Saint Columba, and Saint Celestine, and Coleman, and Kevin, and Brendan, and Phrygian, and Sinan, and Fatna, and Columbanus, and Saint God, and Saint Furzy, and Saint Fintan, and Saint Fiacra, and Saint John Nepomuk, and Saint Thomas Aquinas, and Saint Thomas of Brittany, and Saint Michan, and Saint Herman Joseph, and 3 patrons of holy youth, Saint Aloysius Gonzaga, and Saint Stanislaus Kostka, and Saint John Bertmans, and the Saints Gervasius, Servasius, and Bonifacius, and Saint Bede, and Saint Kieran, and Saint Cass of Kilkenny, and Charlotte of Tuam, and Saint Finbar, and Saint Papan of Ballymun, and Brother Aloysius Pacifius, and Brother Louis Bellicosus, and the Saints Rose of Lima and of Viterbo, and Saint Martha of Bethany, and Mary of Egypt, and Lucy, and Bridget, and Attracta, and Dimphna, and Aisha, and Sister Marian Capensis, and the Blessed Sister Teresa of the Child Jesus, and Bara, and Scholastica, and Ursula with 11,000 virgins. And all came with nimbi, and aureoles, and gloria, bearing hams, and harps, and swords, and olive crowns, in robes whereon were woven the blessed symbols of their efficacies, incorns, arrows, loaves, cruces, fetters, axes, trees, bridges, babes in a bathtub, shells, wallets, shears, keys, dragons, lilies, buckshot, beards, hawks, lamps, bells, beehives, soup ladles, stars, snakes, anvil, boxes of Vaseline, bells, crutches, forceps, stag's horns, whiter tight boots, hawks, millstones, eyes on a dish, wax candles, aspergills, unicorns. And now they wended their way by Nelson's Pillar, Henry Street, Mary Street, Capel Street, Little Britain Street, chanting the intra in Epiphania Domini, which beginneth Surge Luminaire, and thereafter most sweetly gradual omnes would say it, the Sabbath niente de diverse wonders, such as casting out devils, raising the dead to life, multiplying fishes, healing the halt and the blind, discovering various articles which had been mislaid, interpreting and fulfilling scriptures, blessing and prophesying. And last, beneath a canopy of cloth of gold, came the Reverend Father O'Flynn, attended by Malachy and Patrick. And when the good fathers had reached the appointed place, the house of Bernard Kieran and Company Limited, 8, 9 and 10 Little Britain Street, wholesale grocers, wine and brandy shippers, licensed for the sale of beer, wine and spirits for consumption on premises. Celebrant blessed the house and cinced the mullioned windows, and the groins, and the vaults, and the arises, and the capitals and pediments, and the cornices, and the engrailed arches, and the spires, and the cupolas, and sprinkled the lintels thereof with blessed water, and prayed that God might bless that house as he had blessed the house of Abraham, and Isaac, and Jacob, and make the angels of his light to inhabit therein. And entering, he blessed the viand and the beverages, and the company of all the blessed answered his prayers. Auditorium nostrum in nomine Domini, que fecit colam et teram Dominis vobiscam, et cum spiritu tuo. And he thanks, and he prayed, and they all with him prayed, Ius verbo sanctifanctor omnia benedictinem tuum, et fonde supra creatures istas. Preste et quisque et secundum legat volantetum tuum congratorium actione usis fioret per invocationum sanctissimi nomis tui corpus sanitatum et anime tutelum ta actor percipiat per Christum Dominum nostrum. And so say all of us, says Jack. 1,000 a year, Lambert, says Crotton or Crawford. Right, says Ned, taking up his John Jameson, and butter for fish.
I was just looking round to see who the happy thought would strike, when be damned, but in he comes again, letting on to be in a hell of a hurry. I was round at the courthouse, says he, looking for you. I hope I'm not. No, says Martin, we're ready. Courthouse, my eye, and your pocket hanging down with gold and silver. Mean bloody Scot. Stand us a drink itself. Devil a sweet fear. There's a Jew for you. All for number 1. Cute as a shithouse rat. 100 to 5. Don't tell anyone, says the citizen. Beg your pardon, says he. Come on, boys, says Martin. Seeing it was looking blue. Come along now. Don't tell anyone, says the citizen, letting a ball out of him. It's a secret. The bloody dog woke up in a growl. Bye all, says Martin. And he got them out as quick as he could. Jack Power and Crofton, or whatever you call him, and him in the middle of them, letting them to be all at sea, and up with them on the bloody jaunty car. Off it, says Martin to the jarvey. The milk-white dolphin tossed his mane, and rising in the golden poop, the helmsman spread the bellying sail upon the wind, and stood off forward with all sails set, the specker to larboard. And many comely nymphs drew nigh to starboard and to larboard, and clinging to the sides of noble bark, they linked their shining forms as doth the wheelwright when he fashions about the heart of his wheel the equidist rays whereof each one is sister to another, and he binds them all with an outer ring, and giveth speed to the feet of men when as they ride to a hosting or contend for the smile of lady fair. Even so did they come and set them, those willing nymphs, the undying sisters. And they laughed, sporting in a circle of their foam, and the bark clave the waves. But begob, I was just lording the heel of the pint when I saw the citizen getting up to waddle to door, puffing and blowing with the dropty, and he cursing the curse of Cromwell on him, bell, book and candle in Irish, spitting and spatting out of him, and Joe and little laugh round him like a leprechaun trying to peacify him. Let me alone, says he, and begob he got as far as the door and they holding him, and he bawled out of him, 3 cheers for Israel. Ara, sit down on the parliamentary side of your arse for Christ's sake, and don't be making a public exhibition of yourself. Jesus, there's always some bloody clown or other kick up a bloody murder about bloody not gob. It would burn the porter sour in your guts, so it would. And all the ragamuffins and sluts of the nation round the door, and Martin telling the jarvey to drive ahead, and the citizen bawling, and Alf and Joe at him to wisht, and he on his high horse about the Jews and the loafers calling for a speech, and Jack Power trying to get him to sit down in the car and hold his bloody jaw, and a loaf with a patch over his eye starts singing, if the man in the moon was Jew, 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 and a slut shouts out of her, hey mister, your fly is open, mister. And says he, Mendelssohn was a Jew, and Karl Marx, and Mercadante, and Spinoza, and the Saviour was a Jew, and his father was a Jew, your God. He had no father, said Martin. That'll do now, drive ahead. Whose God, says the citizen. Well, his uncle was a Jew, says he. Your God was a Jew. Christ was a Jew like me. God, the citizen made a plunge back into the shop. By Jesus, says he, I'll brain that bloody Jew man for using the holy name. By Jesus, I'll crucify him, so I will. Give that biscuit box here. Stop, says Joe. A large and appreciative gathering of friends and acquaintances from the metropolis and greater Dublin assembled in their thousands to bid farewell to Nagiasegos Urum Lepoti Virag, late of Messer Alexander Toms, printer to His Majesty, on the occasion of his departure for the distant clime of Ses Harminshi Brug Jugalasis Dugalis, meadow of murmuring waters. The ceremony, which went off with great eclat, was characterised by the most affecting cordiality. An illuminated scroll of ancient Irish velum, the work of Irish artists, was presented to the distinguished phenomenologist on behalf of a large section of the community, and was accompanied by the gift of a silver casket, tastefully executed in the style of ancient Celtic ornament, a work which reflects every credit on the makers, Messrs. Jacob, August Jacob. The departing guest was the recipient of a hearty ovation, many of those who present being visibly moved when the select orchestra of Irish pipes struck up the well-known strains of Come Back to Erin, followed immediately by Ragowski's March. Tarbells and bonfires were lighted along the coastline of the four seas, on the summits of the hill of Harte, Three Rock Mountain, Sugarloaf, Brayhead, the mountains of Mourne, the Galties, the Ox and Donegal and Sperrin Peaks, the Nagels and the Bogras, the Connemara Hills, the Ricks of McGillicuddy, Slieve Aughty, Slieve Berna and Slieve Bloom, amid cheers that rent the welkin, responded to by answering cheers from a big muster of henchmen on the distant Cambrian and Cadonian hills. The mastodontic pleasure ship slowly moved away, saluted by a final floral tribute from the representatives of the fair sex, who were present in large numbers, while, as it proceeded downriver, escorted by a flotilla of barges, the flags of the ballast office and custom house were dipped in salute, as were also those of the electrical power station at the Pigeon House. Vivasanta lastra, qued vis baratum, vivisanta lastra, on but not forgotten. Gob, the devil wouldn't stop him till he got hold of the bloody tin anyhow, and out with him and little Alf hanging onto his elbow, and he shouting like a stuck pig, as good as any bloody play in the Queen's Royal Theatre. Where is he till I murder him? Ned and JJ paralysed with the laughing. Bloody war, says I, I'll be in for the last gospel. But as luck would have it, the Jarvey got the nag's head round the other way and off with him. Hold on, citizen, says Joe, stop. Begob he drew his hand and made a swipe and let fly. Mercy of God, sun was in his eyes, he'd left him for dead. Gob, he near sent into the county Longford. The bloody nag took fright, and the old mongrel after the car like bloody hell, and all the populace shouting and laughing, and the old tin boss clattering along the street. The catastrophe was terrific and instantaneous in its effect. The Observatory of Dunsink registered in all 11 shocks, all of the 5th grade of Mercalli scale. There is no record extant of a similar seismic disturbance in our island since the earthquake of 1534, the year of the rebellion of Silk Thomas. The epicentre appears to have been that part of the metropolis which constitutes the Inskey ward and parish of St. Michan, covering a surface of 41 acres, 2 roods and 1 square pole or perch. All the lordly vicinity of